Good morning, everyone, and welcome to NorthStar Community Online Service. Shooting this one outside today. It's a beautiful day, so I take advantage of that. So again, welcome. Again, if you're watching this, you're probably in some form of recovery, or you have a family member or friend who you wish were in recovery or are in recovery, and you're here to support them. So anyway, always good to be here, and looking forward to the talk today. So today we're going to talk about limits. I thought this was kind of interesting. One of the points that an author made some time back I was reading about was that when we have toxic shame, we live without limits. We either, but it's because we just don't establish ourselves, our foundation of ourselves, and we also, look to harm others and ourselves, and so we live without limits. We live too hard. We don't live enough. However you want to look at it, we just continue to damage ourselves in so many ways. And so it's an interesting concept, and I hope it'll help us all again, because our hope is here is that if we become aware of what's going on in our lives, then we can also fix what's going on in our lives and make our lives much better. Because as you remember, our goal is to have a rich, full, meaningful life. And I hope that dog behind me isn't too distracting. So I'm going to start out with reading Genesis 2. We're all familiar with this, I'm sure. It's about Adam and Eve, and basically, I think we've been addictive or throughout the years, and I think this is another example of this. But think about this as such a representative concept around us as humans with our free will, God's love for us, but also our addictive nature. We just can't help ourselves sometimes. So let me read this. So God tells Adam and Eve, you can do anything in the garden you want. You can eat from anything. You can, it's a great life. It sounds like it's just a perfect life in many ways. And he says, but you cannot eat from this one tree, the tree of wisdom, or the tree of life, however you want to look at it. So the only one. Everything else you're access to. And of course, us as humans, we can't help ourselves. So I'll read this to you. So the serpent was clever, more clever than any wild animal God had made. He spoke to the woman, do I understand that God told you not to eat from any tree in the garden? The woman said to the serpent, not at all. We can eat from the trees in the garden. It's only about the tree in the middle of the garden that God said don't eat from it. Don't even touch it or you'll die. The serpent told the woman, you won't die. God knows that. God knows that the moment you eat from the tree, you'll see what's really going on. You'll be just like God, knowing everything, ranging all the way from good to evil. And that kind of represents us in toxic shame. We see ourselves as good and evil and everything in between, and we just don't get limits. When a woman saw that the tree looked like good eating and realized that she would get what she would get out of it, she'd know everything. Wow, just think of that. She took and ate the fruit and then gave some to her husband, and he ate. Immediately, the two of them did see what's really going on, saw themselves naked. They sewed a fig tree. They sewed fig leaves together as a makeshift clothes for themselves. When they heard the sound of God strolling in the garden in the evening breeze, the man and wife hid in the trees of the garden, hid from God. And again, we're going to talk about this, but that's legitimate shame. They messed up. They knew what they were supposed to do, and they felt bad about it. That's shame. God called to the man, where are you? He said, I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, and I hid. God said, who told you you were naked? Did you eat from the tree I told you not to eat from? And the man, being brave and not throwing anybody under the bus, said, the woman you gave me as a companion, she gave me fruit from the tree, and yes, I ate it. God said to the woman, what is this that you've done? The serpent seduced me, she said, and I ate. Isn't it funny how neither one wanted to be responsible for what they'd done? And of course, none of us know that one at all. But they did feel shame, but they also had toxic shame in there. They suddenly saw their flaws and their character problems, and they also showed those character problems by not being honest, which I think we all understand that. So, toxic shame is a self-perpetuating, brutal tyranny. And so it's important for us to understand this because it so harms us it creates harmful images about ourselves. We become very inadequate. We act out that inadequacy, that pain in our lives, and we go out and create all sorts of problems through our addictive thinking and our addictive feelings. And toxic shame tries to get us to not see our pain and our mistakes, just like Adam and Eve. So we can kind of think of the serpent in the Garden of Eden as a representative of toxic shame. Live without limits. Don't worry about it. You're going to be even better. It's going to make you great. You're going to get to live with bravado and all those things. So we have to understand toxic shame. Toxic shame builds on itself. Most often it comes from our childhoods. Either we grew up some really tough childhoods with a lot of trauma, or there was a lot of abandonment issues. But either way, we had stuff happen to us that really created this sense that there was something wrong with us. Everyone was better than us, all those kind of things. It's certainly toxic shame keeps us from a rich, full, meaningful life. And again, we've talked about this. You need healthy shame. Adam and Eve felt healthy shame when they hid from God because they knew they'd done bad. The idea of shame is that it keeps us from repeating mistakes. It keeps us from harming ourselves more and more. None of us like the feeling of shame. And so what do? We hope not to create moments where we have shame. So the way to do that is to live our lives fully and, kind with kindness and love and faith. And when we're addictive, we do anything but that. The problem is with addictive thinking, it creates so much toxic shame in our lives. And toxic shame is deep-rooted inadequacy. It just builds on itself. And like I said, so many of us, we have PTSD, or we have complex PTSD from our childhoods and from our adulthoods and whatever it is. But we carry it with us, and it just keeps creating more and more shame in our lives. So the problem is with toxic shame is we internalize it, and every bit of shame, every bit of mistakes we make, we either run from them or we just keep internalizing it. And we begin to accept our low status, and we just see ourselves as worthless, and we just, we just get, it's such a negative vortex we get into. And we begin to resent others, we resent ourselves, and we start to live an awful life. Because the shame is accepted, it's magnified, and it's internalized. So the physiology of shame is we have probably some forms of trauma in our lives, or abandonment, our cortisol levels are too high, or we have low epinephrine and norepinephrine, we have low energy, we have high anxiety, we have depression, we have toxic shame, all those things. So there's some physiology to this as well. But there's three things we do when we have toxic shame. One is we have atrophisms, say it right here, and that's atrophy thinking. We just beat the crap out of ourselves all the time. We do not let up on ourselves. We can find every reason, every idea, everything we can do to harm ourselves, to think badly of ourselves, to blame ourselves. And so it gets too high for us. That's why we go into addiction, because then we can cover the pain, or at least ignore it for a moment. And so habitual behavior to avoid pain is one way of getting around this. But we also know, because of the addictive behaviors and thinking, we also know that we continue to self-destruct, which creates even more shame. So the fact is, we could just never get out of our own way. The second thing is we believe that we're never enough. No matter what we do, no matter how good we do, no matter what wonderful things we do, it's never enough. So sometimes it's just easier to not try. Sometimes it's just easier just to get through. And again, drugs, alcohol, compulsive behaviors, people, all these things, we try to put them in place to help us not feel so bad about ourselves. But the problem is mediocrity is just painful, and we're never enough. And the other thing is that we do is that, we one day, maybe one day, we're going to feel good enough about ourselves, one day, but we know that never happens. And then of course we have atrophy thinking, we have mediocrity, where we just don't believe we're able to live a life that's rich, full, and meaningful life. I know so many times in NorthStar, when we talk about a rich, full, meaningful life, some of us are almost offended in there by that, because we just don't believe that will ever happen. Or worse, in toxic shame, we don't believe we ever deserve it. So that's what we do with toxic shame. We see ourselves as never enough. No matter what we do, it's never enough. One day we may be good enough, but not today. We're always going to be looking for mediocrity as our goal. If we get too successful, we get uncomfortable, and we'll do things to sabotage that. And of course, in our atrophy thinking, where we just always are on ourselves and blaming ourselves for so much of what's going on bad in our lives. So the thing we got to remember is, to help us get through this, is we are not God. Mistakes happen. We are not unlimited. We're going to make mistakes. And we do have limits. There's things we can and cannot do. If I drink every day and I drink excessively, I'm going to have physical issues and I'm going to become addicted eventually. If I'm on my screen time for 8 hours a day, someday, some way that is going to affect me negatively. We are not unlimited. We are not above things happening to us. I always remember I grew up in Nebraska, so one of my childhood heroes is Johnny Carson. For some of you may know who he was, but he was a late night talk show host, probably the most recognized man in America. Brilliant comedian, terrible life, lots of shame. His mother was very mean and cruel to him. She never was pleased. And when he was at the height of his stardom, he still was looking for her love. So he became an excessive drinker and smoker. And he just always believed that he was not one of those people that was going to get emphysema from smoking, and that's what killed him. He really believed that he could live. He did not have limits for that. And he really, for all he had, he was an unhappy man in so many ways. And I think we can relate to that, though. It was just almost impossible for him to accept who he was. And so the point is, mistakes are going to happen. Hurt's going to happen. We're also going to have good things, but we're not unlimited either way. We're not always going to have good times. We're not always going to have bad times. And that's what we have to see in life. So healthy shame equals the realistic limits. It's the problem we have with shame, when we have toxic shame and we have no limits, it leads to delusions of grandeur. We think we can do anything. We create elaborate fictional fantasies of power, success, fame, glory. We think we can actually control our addictions like Johnny Carson did. If we don't know our limits, we don't have direction. We try to go everywhere at once. We try to do everything. Some of you may even think about, I'm a jack of all trades, but a master of none. I know people who live dangerously physically because of this, because of their toxic shame and their dislike for themselves. So shame tells us what our limits are, and it also signals our directions. And shame can help us get to that rich, full, meaningful life. With healthy shame, we can use our energy more effectively and not waste ourselves on stuff that we don't need to be doing. So think of shame, toxic shame on a continuum. This side's shame, this side's toxic shame. And the problem is, what I see with so many of us with toxic shame is, for some of us, and this is probably where I fall when I was younger, was I just limited myself. I didn't believe in myself. I had so much toxic shame, I just didn't think that I could achieve great things. On the other hand, I knew people who I used to wonder, golly, how do they do these things? The stories they would tell, driving too fast, being in fights, having affairs, running here, running there, drunk all the time, or whatever it was. That was the other side of it. They lived without any limits and were so much misery and pain. I think this is where, the ACE score, we talk about the adverse childhood experiences, and I think this is such a telling statistic here for us when we're talking about toxic shame. Is on the ACE score, there's 10 scores. It basically scores you on neglect, abuse, and dysfunctional household as a child. If anybody scores a 6 or more without intervention, they will die on average 20 years younger than someone who scores a 0 or 1 on the ACE score. So think about that. That's what this is. It's about toxic shame. If you have a 6 or more, they don't say this, but I'm saying it's the toxic shame is high. So we live recklessly. We get with people we shouldn't. We use substances we shouldn't. We get compulsive in our behaviors. We live recklessly. Or, unfortunately, or the other side of it is we don't live at all, and we live with depression and resentment and sadness. But you can see, toxic shame is not what we want. Shame is important. We don't want it, but that's important to us. But toxic shame is destructive. It destroys who we are. It just creates so many things. And so if we're healthy, we can admit to, we can identify, and we can change behaviors that we need to. With toxic shame, we hide, we deny, we blame, we resent, and we don't fix the mistakes. So actually, sometimes we even make it look like we meant to do it. But it isn't what we have done or not done that creates the problems. It's how we interpret what we have done. Toxic shame makes us believe that we are far worse than warranted, or that we see ourselves completely as a mistake that can never be fixed. It's not okay. It's not fair to think this way. So a question for you is, what beliefs do you have that keeps your toxic shame alive and well? And maybe even a harder question, Anna Lemke asked this in her Dopamine Nations book, as she goes, what pleasures do you get from all this pain? How in the world is toxic shame something we hang on to? You know, in NorthStar means oftentimes I'll say, I think a lot of this is what our true addiction is toxic shame. We are addicted to the concept that we are a flawed, bad, worthless person who doesn't deserve anything good. And thus we go out and find other people who believe the same thing. We get ourselves involved in compulsive behaviors that at least gives us a little bit of feelings of something for a while, or of course we get into the substances. We may of course do all that. So we have to have self-compassion here. You have to accept that you are flawed and you will make mistakes. We will. We need to accept God's grace for you. God loves us. He does not judge us and hold on to things. It's us that does that. He knows our hearts. I always tell people, look at how we behave. You can do it in kind of breaking into four categories. One of my colleagues, Jerry Schaefer, used to tell me this, and I always have loved this. So we do the right thing for the right reasons. We do the right thing for the wrong reasons. We do the wrong things for the right reasons, and we do the wrong things for wrong reasons. And toxic shame, when we get eaten up with that, so much of it really is wrong thing, wrong reasons. And we have to figure out ways to get past this. And you know what? Maybe you are worthless. Maybe I'm worthless. We certainly are, in some levels, worthless at some things. I'm pretty good at some things, and I am worthless at other things. So I'm going to read this quote here. So yes, you really might be inadequate in real life. Your life has been a failure. And it's because all along you've had this same feeling of not being good enough, from the first issues in childhood through adolescence, school, working out. It's spiraled downhill to the point where the issue is not what you feel bad. It's not that you feel bad, but that you literally are bad. Your life is literally inadequate. You know what? You're better off if today you say, you know what, there's truth to this, but I'm going to do something about it. What's not okay is if you say, that's not me, I don't do all the blah, 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 and I'm going to go out and use and act dysfunctionally again. But what happens if you are really worthless? Maybe it's not so bad to say that. We're all worthless in some ways. Like me, I got friends who can fix anything. Car breaks down, they know what it is. Plumbing breaks down, they know what it is. All that stuff. I, on the other hand, see it as a mystery. So I'm kind of worthless when it comes to fixing things. And for a long time in my life, I felt that. But now I don't. Now I see that I have strengths and skills in other areas. And so it's okay for me not to be great at everything. But see, toxic self tells us that we have to see ourselves as worthless in everything. Remember, we're not enough. We're inadequate. We do all these things wrong. We're flawed. Everybody else is better than us. All these things. Or I think I'm so grand and perfect and I can do whatever I want. The point is, we create a self-fulfilling prophecy that we need to figure out ways to stop. If you see yourself as unattractive, you're going to probably be unattractive and you'll quit caring for yourself. If you take pride in your health and see that's okay, then you're worth enough to take care of your health and eat right and exercise, then you're not going to be unattractive. It isn't about what you're born with, it's what we do with it. It's the problem is for many of us with toxic shame, it just creates a long line of poor to destructive behaviors and thinking. So the problem is with toxic shame, this is why I say we get addicted to it, is that what we do is we get so hooked on toxic shame that it becomes a lifelong, permanent thing as a justification for our inadequacies. then yes, we do have issues. And insecurities can be pretty brutal at times. They clearly fracture who we are when we can see our insecure when we can't see our insecurities. So you know the drill here. Face the shame, face our pain. You know, the problem is for many of us, I've heard people say this, and I bet some of you understand this. We don't face our pain. Instead, we just live our toxic shame. And we start to believe things like, well, maybe I'm autistic, or maybe I'm a sociopath, or maybe I'm a borderline personality. The chances are you're not. The real chance is that you have so much toxic shame in you, you don't know what to do with it, and you don't know how to react to it. And so one of the problems is when we have too much toxic shame, we cut off the emotions. So our brain, think of our brain, put our brains in two sides. And again, this is the way I oversimplified it. So you have one side that's the neocortex, and it's responsible for thinking, analyzing, reasoning, processing. That's the rational side of your brain. And the limbic system is our responsible for emotions, senses, memories, and motivation. You got to have both to be good. You want a rich, full, meaningful life? You got to have both of them. Can't live on your emotions. Can't live with just facts and figures all the time. You got to put them together. You got to have the real life, and you got to have the human element. You put them together, you're a pretty complete person. So the problem is when our toxic shame gets too high, when our anxiety gets too high, our depressions get too high, all these things that accompany toxic shame, then we have what we call neuron gating. So now our brain, there's a gate that slams shut between the two parts of the brain, and it inhibits our pain, it inhibits our, the shame and all those things. But the problem is, it also reduces our effective thinking. So because we've now shut off the communication between the two brains, so we have to open the gate. And you know what? We know the drill. We have to face our pain. We have to stop using. We have to stop being so compulsive in our behaviors. We have to identify all those things that is more powerful than us and that has become unmanageable in our lives. So we have to become aware of those things. We have to trust God. We have to have radical honesty. We have to be honest with ourselves. And the only way we can do that is we got to get around other people who are going through the same journey you are to help you get through past this toxic shame. Can you imagine embracing yourself as you are and seeing yourself as a good and decent person? Wow. And one of the ways to do this is we have to acknowledge the gift of powerlessness. By admitting powerlessness, we have nothing left to fear. The moment that someone goes from do not have issues, I am not addicted, I am doing great, everything's wonderful in my life, to saying, you know what? There are things in my life that are more powerful than me, and they're unmanageable, and I need God, and I need others around me. What a great day. You guys know this. When we're no longer trying to uphold false standards and maintain these false images, when we're not out there living with bitterness and resentment and keeping ourselves down and pounding on ourselves and seeing everything we do as wrong, all those things, we can quit justifying our actions. We can stop creating excuses. We can embrace the healthy human shame, and we can admit that we're not perfect. When we're humble to the core, that means we have nothing left to lose, and thus nothing left to fear. By feeling the pain we're trying to avoid, we free ourselves from the menacing grasp of all of our actions and our toxic shame. I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty good. We have to embrace our powerlessness. We will find freedom from it. For toxic shame, this means admitting we're imperfect and never will be perfect. I hate to break to you, but none of you will be. It means that we're admitting we're flawed, like every other human being. Then we live our lives in humble state. We learn about what pain we have and how to deal with it. Our fears about not being good enough and being imperfect are completely irrational. That's what we start to learn. We start to break down our associations between imperfection, inadequacy, and pain. After spending time like this with other people who are going through the same journey, it gets to be less and less difficult. So take action. We need to become conscious of what we're doing. We need to see this inadequacy, this powerlessness we're doing. We need to remove things that are giving us problems. And I hate to say it, but for some of us, we have to get other toxic people out of our lives. And I know that's so hard to do. You can do it, but you need support around you. It isn't that you're better than someone else, but sometimes we get around people who are just not good for us, and we're probably not good for them. We also have to let go of things that we're doing. If I'm spending 8 hours on screen time, there's a pretty good chance I'm now compulsive. And I say 8 hours to example. If I'm on screen time for 2 hours a day, think about the amount of time that is. And a lot of times, if you look with our toxic shame, we're looking for ways to harm ourselves or to feel better about ourselves, when the fact is, screen time's not going to do that either. And we have to start changing who we are as a person. You're not that bad. In fact, God created you. You are an awesome person. So start taking actions. Clean up your house. Clean up your room, whatever it is. I know it sounds silly, but do good hygiene. Exercise. Find people in your life that are healthy. Get yourself to groups. Regular social contact with good people who are in the same journey you are will do more than anything else. Again, get rid of toxic people in your life. Shame and inadequacy, you got to remember, are very self-centered emotions and thoughts. We're the ones seeing the bad in us. Well, and of course, some of us in our dysfunctional families, that's reinforced too. But when we can get a sense of what it means to be human, to not be perfect, but to be human, to have flaws and understand that, and do things and not be so flawed, that's what we want. And so we have to understand that I think the greatest line in addiction recovery is we are sick as our secrets. You will not overcome toxic shame as long as you're living secrets and lies. Get with other people. Get to support groups. Of course, in our case, we love NorthStar Community. Find ways to get there. When you start getting rid of those secrets, oh my goodness, the power you will feel in your life. And think about this too, a little self-drill here, is if you were someone else's mentor, what would you be telling them to do? Because it's probably what you need to be doing. So here's the deal. To conclude, God loves you. Eventually, I know you don't buy this, but when you get into recovery, eventually you will see your traumas and abandonments as a gift, because it makes you more connected with other people. And what I see over and over in recovery is God will take your healthiness and he will put you in front of people who are struggling and suffering just like you are or were. It's a beautiful thing. You are not God. You are not perfect, and you never will be. And you know what? That's what makes you human. See your pain, see your inadequacies, look at them, recognize them, journal them, whatever you need to do. You have to start somewhere. You are not cursed, you are not stupid, and you are not inadequate. It's okay for you to have a rich, full, meaningful life. It's okay for you to live without all this toxic shame. It's okay for you to be happy. So understand also that your memories are not always accurate. So just remember, toxic shame, your memories are always going to be skewed to the negative. So I hope that today's been helpful. I think this is a fascinating subject about limits, and when we're addicted in our addictive behaviors, we live without limits. We either, one side of the limitations are that we're so inadequate and worthless that we deserve to do nothing but bad things and harm ourselves, and we don't want to face all this stuff in our lives because it means we're not perfect, which means we're not adequate. Or the other side, I see people who I call running from their ghosts, who are overachieving, overfunctioning, overwrought, just destroying their lives. They may even be successful, as we call it, in our affluent country, but the fact is they're miserable. It's okay for us to have peace. It's okay for us to have a rich, full, meaningful life, full of purpose and love and connection. And I wish that for all of you. So, NorthStar Community, we meet on Wednesdays and Fridays at 6:30. I'm so excited that Wednesday nights now we do have childcare. So if you are local and you have children that are elementary age and you can't come because of that, bring them with you. We have things for them to do now. These are wonderful meetings, so much honesty, so much fear that comes in and we leave feeling better about ourselves because we hear from others as well who are struggling. If you ever want to contact me, you can call me at 804-746-5081. You can also email me at csimpson@wgva.church. And again, thank you so much for coming today. And let's close with the prayer of serenity. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as a pathway to peace. Taking, as Jesus did, the sinful world as it is, not as I would have it. Trusting that Jesus will make all things right if I surrender to his will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever in the next. Amen. Have a great week, everyone. Thanks for joining.